Today we talk about the British Armed Forces. To protect the nation, we step forward and meet every challenge. The British Army protects the United Kingdom's interests at home and abroad, providing a safe and secure environment in which all British citizens can live and prosper. This is what we read on the institutional website of the British Army, the land component of the British Armed Forces, also known as Her Majesty's Armed Forces. Founded in 1707 with the unification of the governments and armed forces of England and Scotland in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, the British Armed Forces are made up of a total of 153,000 active duty soldiers, that is, regulars and Gurkhas, plus 37,000 volunteer reserves and 8,000 other personnel by 2021. Distributed as such, 40,000 in the Navy, 33,000 of which are regulars, 120,000 in the Army, 86,000 regulars, 37,000 in the Air Force, 33,000 regulars. The British Armed Forces are actively engaged around the world, from maintaining peace to providing humanitarian aid, from implementing anti-terrorism measures to combating the international drug trade. Although its armed forces are not among the most numerous in terms of number of personnel, Great Britain within NATO is the first country after the US in military spending. In 2021, I think it was 54 billion pounds. This would make the UK the fourth, fifth largest military budget spending country in the world. In 2017, the expenses touched 178 billion pounds a year. So, looking at the British Armed Forces, of course, I hope we'll make as many videos as possible in the future about the incredible history of the country, its rich tradition. And as we know, the Navy of Britain is also her pride. Traditionally, the country has arguably the most glorious maritime military tradition in the world. The maritime component of the British Armed Forces is Her Majesty's Naval Service, made up of the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, so the amphibious troops, Royal Naval Reserve, the Royal Marines Reserve, and Naval Carriers Service. For centuries, the pride and strength of the British Empire has been its navy. And even during the Second World War, this played a dramatically important role in allowing Britain to survive the siege of Hitler, guaranteeing supplies along the sea routes. And after the war, the absolute value of British naval forces has surely somewhat declined at the end of the empire and all, especially in relation globally to the growing gap with the United States superpower. However, this has not prevented the British Navy from acting effectively when necessary, as famously in 1982, war was fought and won with Argentina in the remote Falkland Islands. In 1986, the Royal Navy had 30 submarines in service, 48 destroyers and frigates, 7 amphibious assault ships, and 3 aircraft carriers with a force of 70,000 sailors. These numbers have dropped to 30,000 sailors, including 7,000 Royal Marines, 11 submarines, 18 destroyers and frigates, 2 amphibious assault ships, and 2 brand new aircraft carriers, the most prestigious component now, which have formally entered in service in 2017 after some running problems. We're talking about the HMS Queen Elizabeth and the HMS Prince of Wales, Queen Elizabeth-class. The air component on the HMS Queen Elizabeth was deployed, and the first operational patrol took place in 2020. This year, the HMS Prince of Wales will also enter service. The Queen Elizabeth-class units have 280 meters long and 70 meters wide deck and can accommodate a maximum capacity of 36 F-35Bs plus a rotor-flying group of helicopters. The new component embarked on HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Queen Elizabeth guarantees an offensive capacity on carriers second only to that of the United States, even though Russia thinks otherwise, but this is another matter. The acquisition costs of the Queen Elizabeth class, so it's 2 units, and related embarked aircraft group, by the way, the F-35B, the only platform capable of operating on the bridge is the STO VL configuration, that is basically with short takeoff and vertical landing. Right, London has ordered 138 fighters of this type, are 40.3 billion pounds. The Queen Elizabeth class, according to the British Ministry of Defence, will reach full extent operational capability by 2026. Great Britain has officially opened a permanent Royal Navy base called HMS Jafar in Mina Salman in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and the new base costs about $23 million and was funded almost entirely by the royal family of Bahrain. HMS Jafar, so a base that the British first opened actually in 1935 but lost control in 1971 to the United States, is home to some 500 Royal Navy personnel including sailors, soldiers and airmen. Manama, the capital of Bahrain, is also home to the headquarters of the United States 5th Fleet, by the way. Today, London has returned to invest considerably in the fleet, as we have seen, with a new class of air carriers aiming for quality and technology rather than the numbers, as you have seen in the drop of the total number of personnel, less than a half, and the one of commissioned ships. This was normal after the end of the Cold War, but even considering the new challenges that we are facing globally, so the UK has opted again for quality and a hell of a high level one. The Royal Navy is a technologically sophisticated naval force, at this point consisting of 79 commissioned ships still. And what is mostly impressive of the British Navy capabilities is their underwater nuclear power. The strength of the Royal Navy, in fact, is closely linked to the British nuclear arsenal. The deterrent capability is based on 4 Vanguard-class submarines, the HMS Vanguard, the HMS Victorious, the HMS Vigilant, and the HMS Vengeance. The Vanguard-class is armed with Trident II D5 ballistic missiles, equipped with independent and constantly upgraded multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles warheads, which means basically an exo-atmospheric ballistic missile payload containing several warheads, each capable of being aimed to hit a different target. So you launch a missile, and then eventually these warheads will go for a different objective at a point. The concept is almost invariably associated, of course, with intercontinental ballistic missiles carrying thermonuclear warheads, even if not strictly limited with them. Yet this is basically what we're talking about now. Each Vanguard-class submarine can carry up to 16 missiles, that is 200 thermonuclear warheads. But the submarines are currently equipped with 8 missiles for 40 warheads in base the limitations established by the 2010 treatises. Also, according to the British government from April 1969, quote, the Royal Navy ballistic missile boats have not missed a single day on patrol. According to the continuous at-sea deterrence doctrine, a British nuclear-powered strategic submarine is always underway to cover possible targets. In fact, 1 in reserve and 2 in training or maintenance. Britain's largest missile base is famously located in Scotland and houses the entire British strategic force. The central command of the Vanguards is located at the Clyde base known as Faslane. Although relatively modern, Vanguard-class nuclear-powered submarines, which entered in service in 1990, require ongoing maintenance, and in 2016, the House of Commons has planned to replace them by 2030-35 by a new class of ballistic submarines, the Dreadnought class, while the government will continue to support the Trident missile-based asset on pain of the end of the British sub-launch deterrent capacity. Trident 2 D5 missiles will also arm Britain's new strategic submarines. In terms of nuclear capabilities, Britain has a very specific system of control and is one of the countries that sees more lucidly and clearly in a strategic understanding the purpose of the use of nuclear weapons. Only the British Prime Minister can authorize the launch of the Trident ballistic missiles according to strict authentication protocols. Of course, it should be noted that the British Tridents do not have the permissive action link, that is essentially a device that serves to prevent unauthorized use of atomic weapons, preventing them from arming if a secret code or combination is not entered, as the one is installed on the US missiles, for example. Northwood's CTF 345, the only liaison facility with the patrolling Vanguards, is responsible for authenticating the codes. In fact, once the launches are enabled, the CTF 345 sends the orders via emergency action message to the submarine. The two-person concept prevents the accidental use of nuclear weapons, of course. The two officers who keep only the keys to the control panel must agree on the pre-formatted and undamaged codes they have received. The type of nuclear option chosen by the Prime Minister also appears in the message. Another possibility was considered. In the event that the UK ceases to exist after a preemptive nuclear attack, the commander of the submarine unit would have to open the so-called letter of last resort, kept in a safe on the control room deck, to follow the instructions. These letters are handwritten by the British Prime Minister at the time of his inauguration and are immediately placed by the secret services in the safe in the control room of each submarine. And to open them, the commander of the submarine must have reasonable certainty that a nuclear disaster has hit the UK. If attempts to make contact with Naval Command fail, and major British radio stations such as BBC Radio 4 programs are not received, not intercepted, the submarine commander will open the sealed document. The contents of those letters represent the latest direct order from the British government, which is believed to have been cancelled by a preemptive nuclear strike. The top of the political authority, the Prime Minister, there is also a second designated non-public figure, grants the military authority to the submarine commander of complete decision-making autonomy over the launch of strategic missiles. There are also recommendations such as putting the unit under the command of the United States, if they still exist, or heading to Australia. Those letters represent both the testament of the writer and the retaliation order against those who allegedly cancelled Great Britain. Speaking of the British land forces, the British Army is now composed of a total force of 86,000 units, of which 30,000 are reservists, as we have seen before, and about 4,000 Gurkhas, Nepalese troops. The armed force is now deployed in many war zones around the world as part of the United Nations Combat and Peacekeeping Forces. Officially, British troops are deployed in the Baltics, Belize, Brunei, Canada, Cyprus, Germany, Gibraltar, Iraq, Mali, just to name the government-recognized missions. Then they're actually deployed in around 80 countries. The heavy component of the British Army is made up of the Challenger 2 tanks. 227 of the 400 heavy systems delivered are still in active service. Some of that have been modernized. They do not require essentially a substitution. The FV-4034 Challenger 2 entered in service in 1998 to replace its predecessor, the Challenger 1. And the British Army's eyes and ears on the battlefields would have been supposed to be the 589 reconnaissance armored vehicles of the Ajax problem. Yeah, exactly. Not program, but problem, let's say. Even the lapsus is correct, because the supply should have been completed by 2024. But there were severe issues, right? Such as, for example, they were so noisy that the troops could suffer from hearing loss. And also there were some aiming problems with the cannon as well. And built as the first ever digital armored vehicle in UK military history, it's an impressive thing. The Ajax armor can reach 40 miles per hour, is equipped with this 40 millimeter gun. However, other problems were present even before properly spotting the most serious ones that could cause really severe damage to the crews in terms of health. And the excessive weight, for example, in a battle-ready modular operational configuration, we're talking about 44 tons that would have prevented the Ajax armor to be transported on the new Atlas A400M of the Royal Air Force. To ship it anywhere in the world, it would have had to essentially, the armor would have to be removed of the additional side armor, which increases its size and width, preventing it from being transported even on aircraft with greater load capacity. That it's a feature that was considered essential in combat. Some Challenger 2s are being substituted by the Challenger 3 class, which basically uses the same chassis, but has a different turret, etc. In 2005, the UK Ministry of Defence also ordered 54 Watchkeeper drones for £1.2 billion. Continuing tactical problems, except for a brief experience in Afghanistan, postponed the drones entry into service to 2018, so 13 years after the contract was signed. Before we mention the Gurkhas, that are kind of an important element traditionally in the British infantry forces, as much actually as in the one of other Southeast Asian countries. So the Royal Gurkha Rifles constitute an elite corps in the service of Her Majesty, made up exclusively of Nepalese soldiers, framed in 4 regiments. So from 1815, during the expansion of the British Empire, Britain began to enlist Nepalese soldiers in the British East India Company, given their enviable and admirable skills as fighters. And there we will talk about them also in other videos, not just about contemporary warfare, but the name Gurkha derives from the Hindu Gorakhnath, a native of the hill town of Gorkha, from where the Nepalese kingdom began its expansion. And since the Gurkhas have faithfully fought for the British around the world, earning 13 Victoria Crosses, so the highest military honor, and participating in 2 world wars and in other wars such as in the Falklands, the Balkans, Sierra Leone, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. Their fame and deeds are very well known. Among the Gurkhas, there is a rule, right? Once the kukri, so this 40 centimeters long Nepalese knife that represents the courage and valor of the warrior, has been brought into battle, its lethal curved blade must test the blood of the enemy, otherwise it will be up to its owner to wet it with his own before putting it back in the scabbard. And an anecdote can serve as example. On the night of March the 25th, 2011, Sergeant Diprasad Pun was on sentry duty near Babai in the province of Helmand in southern Afghanistan when he was attacked by 50 terrorists. So we're talking about 50 to 1, right? The terrorists were convinced that he was an easy prey, right? And this was the first mistake. Diprasad Pun was a highly decorated Gurkha soldier, expert in asymmetric guerrilla warfare and mortal hand-to-hand combat. Of the 50 terrorists who attacked him, 30 never made it home. 20 fled. Basically, the soldier fired all of his 400 rounds, dropped 17 hand grenades, and detonated a mine, and when he finished his bullets, he switched to the 2 kukri. The terrorists also had run by then out of ammunition and faced him in hand-to-hand combat. That was their last mistake. Until then, the insurgents also ignored the Gurkha motto that is, better to die than to live like a coward. And this basically tells it all, right? In single combat, all you need is to be able to kill a human being without even blinking of an eye. And this is what these men are perfect for. And we should be thankful of having their service. The Royal Air Force is also an iconic arm and gloriously connected to the Battle of Britain. Not only, it was established on April the 1st, 1918. Right, it assumed this significant place in British military history, playing a leading role in World War II and more recent wars. The UK Air Force is made up of, as we've seen, 33,000 units, of which 3,000 are in reserve. So you understand that obviously a much greater part of reserve, of the whole reserve, is for the army, whereas the British Navy and the Air Force are essentially made just of regular personnel. So during the Cold War years, the Royal Air Force was still of great importance because its primary task was defending the European continent against potential Soviet Union attacks, including by maintaining the UK's nuclear deterrent for a number of years. And the Eurofighter Typhoon FGR-4 in the Royal Air Force is the Royal Air Force's air superiority aircraft, with a total of 6 squadrons, right, 5 in the front line and 1 in reserve station at the main bases of Coningsby and Lossiemouth. Their job is to defend UK airspace. The main bombing force is the Tornado GR-4, although since June 2008 the Eurofighter has also been deployed in the air-to-ground role. The Royal Air Force operates 3 Tornado squadrons based in Marham. The Panavia Tornado fighter bombers entered in service in 1979, and they were designed to penetrate Soviet territory at a very low altitude and at a very high speed, releasing their load, including the nuclear one, on sites of strategic interest following the terrain profile at 1,000 kilometers per hour. And this technique was effective in a war context that could have been carried out, of course, 40 years ago. This characteristic, the low altitude and very high speed grazing flight, right, called in jargon the ability to penetrate in depth, was however overcome with the end of Soviet bloc and the spread of increasingly efficient anti-aircraft missile systems. Tornadoes have thus been converted to operate at medium-high altitude, but only in contexts with a relatively poor enemy in terms of air defense. The Tornadoes will be replaced by the F-35s in the current climate of tension that characterizes international scenarios, with on the one hand the threat of Islamist jihadism, and on the other hand the overwhelming return of the threat from Russia, whose main frictions have, in fact, for years been mostly with Britain. London has resumed pushing on the pedal of military expenses to revive its war tradition, not only to defend its almost impregnable islands, but also to protect its interests worldwide. There is a note about the employment of the Special Air Service, about which we will make a multiple videos on, because they are famously enough, the 22nd Regiment, not only the main special corps of the British Army, but also essentially the best special forces in the world. And today we talk just about one curious, relatively little known, but still significant mission that started a few years ago, when the SAS operators from the G Squadron and the Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Wing, that are specifically trained in close-quarter combat, were infiltrated among the homeless in major British cities. So their mission is to guarantee an immediate response to a terrorist attack, limiting the victims with counter-guerrilla tactics, and each operator is equipped with an Eckler & Koch MP7 that is, pretty handy, suitable for use in urban environment, which guarantees high precision in close combat, and as well as with body armor, survival kits, communication systems, and etc., capable of providing a response in a matter of seconds. And so what you technically have is the best special forces in the world, disguised as beggars and homeless people, infiltrated to essentially create a cordon of protection around sensitive sites. Right? They are to guarantee within a few minutes of firepower equal to a patrol. Right? They are distributed in a way that they can essentially compact in a few time, and they receive food and assistance from other members of the regiment disguised as volunteers helping the homeless. And this is quite interesting, because the threat they're deployed like that for is actually quite real. Or at least it was. Fortunately, we haven't witnessed more than much in the very last years. But the Joint Terrorism Analysis Center does consider such threat still quite probable. So the task of the 22nd Regiment operators is to immediately engage such threat, and in the British cities, think just as London is one of the most important cities in the world, and so a urban fabric that does require such such deployment, also in disguise, for even not alarming the populace, because they don't know who these people are, and so equally the terrorists. So the entire operation is coordinated by actually the British police, say in the service which the SAS are in this operation, but it is of course the United Kingdom Special Forces that manages communications and any developments of the units in the field. The British regular units have orders not to patrol the areas covered by this Special Air Service, or to move away in the presence of the operators without arousing suspicion. So, advice to terrorists: don't make terrorist attacks, because this is and we will keep talking about other counters armored forces, given the current situation, just to realize this is something that I as a military historian I like doing in the first place, because of the comprehensive necessity of military historical understanding for any age, right? Therefore, for today it's all. See you next time.